Thank you, everyone, for the invitation. And I think it's my first attempt to have a public discussion on cyber risks and cyber risks insurance, and in the maritime field at least. And I certainly would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to make that presentation. Now, as part of the Institute, and as Tabitha very eloquently described, we are very much looking into cyber risks and autonomous vessels. We recently received a grant on cyber risks in Wales, and we have two publications in 2021 related to cyber risks and insurance, one by me and one by Professor Barry Sawyer. And the presentation today that I will give is a combination of our two publications on cyber risks. I will cover the, let's say, the practical aspect of cyber risks and how they are becoming an issue increasingly for the maritime sector. And also we're going to look a little bit into liability and how insurers in London at least try to avoid cover for cyber risks, at least in the maritime sector. And then at the end, like Tabitha did, I have my own views on future liabilities arising from cyber risks and to some extent from automated systems. Now, let's start. Now, cyber risks in the shipping sector, I think everyone is now involved one way or another with cyber issues. The reason behind that is that we have an increasing number of vessels providing on-board internet access. We started with a little bit more than 10,000 vessels in 2008. And in 2018, we have almost 40,000 vessels providing internet access to the seafarers. And as the years grow, certainly this number will certainly also grow. Now, in a very recent research also in 2019, the International Chamber of Shipping, they noted that at the moment, in 2019, 82% of shipping companies provide crew internet access, which is one part of the problem, i.e. to the extent that seafarers use the internet in ways that doesn't compromise the safety of the operation, the security of the operations. But the other major part, and that's probably the biggest problem that we face in the shipping sector, is what I have on the last part of my slide here, is that there is a technological merge of information technology systems with operational technology systems. And what I mean by that is that in the past, usually the hardware of vessels was operated by human beings, with the information was inputted into the systems by human beings. But in most situations, IT systems were only monitoring hardware operations on board vessels. The best example we had that IT systems were interfering with OT systems was the operation of autopilots on board the vessels. But the rest of it was mostly human-centric, if I might say so. The current trend we have, and if anyone can see integrated bridge operations, you can see propulsion and machinery aspects of modern vessels, is that they are not anymore controlled by human beings. There's a bit of a change in the balance there, where we have more computers controlling the systems, and the human beings then monitor the computers that control the systems. Now, those developments, which whether we like it or not, are the future. We're not going to go back, I think, steps in that sense, raise significant issues of cybersecurity. And they raise significant issues of cybersecurity because it's not anymore the cyber dimension is what I said already, the part of the security aspect of a vessel, but it's also part of the safety aspect of a vessel. And as Tabitha said very well in her presentation, is that you might have a collision now, not because someone wanted really to interfere with your operation cyber-wise, but because one of your crew members or one of your seafarers did something wrong, or, for example, didn't follow the protocols vis-a-vis the plugging in of USB device and so on and so on. Now, unfortunately for the shipping sector, and unlike other sectors like aviation, for example, the industry wasn't switched on to this risk. And if you look into the first report of ENISA is the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, they had a whole report on the maritime sector 10 years ago in 2011, and they pointed out that the maritime sector is probably one of the worst in terms of dealing with cyber risks on board vessels. And one of the reasons that they gave behind this non-involvement was that there are not many mechanisms in the industry to identify and report cyber incidents. Now, what are the benefits of this integration of IT and OT? Now, the main benefit is that the operators of vessels can get real-time data about voyage performance, about emissions, about fuel, about waiting time at ports, about coordination with other multimodal carriers, which means usually real-time data allows them to manage their operations more efficiently, which end up resulting in saving money. Now, the ultimate aim, if you look at from a technological point of view, is to have what I call there the digital twin concept, where essentially the full operation of a vessel from the time of construction up to the time it's been in operation is being digitally monitored. And all the data are collected in cloud systems, which are then shared, parts of the cloud system or part of the information with regulators, other participants in the trade, your business partners, and so on. We are still far away from it, but recently the Danish Maritime Authority issued a full report on how feasible the digital twin concept will be in how many years yet they think that the industry will start to adopt the digital twin concept. At the same time now, and if we look into the equation of seafarers, yes, the recent report of the International Chamber of Shipping has demonstrated that, yes, giving access to the internet on board the vessel improves the mental health of seafarers. And if you look from a cruise ship perspective, there is no way now that the passenger on board a vessel, a cruise ship, will not want or will not need to have internet on board to take selfies, to put on Instagram and show how exciting places they have visited and so on and so on, which again raises an issue of access, raises an issue of how these passengers or how these seafarers use the internet and whether there are sufficient safeguards from using the publicly accessible internet on board the vessel to access the safety restricted internet part of the vessel. Now, going back to Tabitha's presentation as well, cyber risks are here to stay, and the reason for cyber risks being here to stay and have to be managed is that the autonomy of operations. Even if we don't move anytime soon close to fully autonomous vessel operations, we are certainly moving to more automated functions on board the vessels. And those automated functions, whether they are cargo management, propulsion management, navigation, are all, the trend is now to be controlled electronically. And when we speak about electronic control, we inevitably discuss and we have to deal with cyber risks. And the evidence now is that they're becoming a problem. And because they're becoming a problem, especially in the latest part of the last decade, IMO has taken an initiative to deal with cyber risks. Now, I have historically identified a few of the most important incidents in the shipping industry. And if you look, especially the first three ones, which were very well publicized, the Maersk attack and the COSCO attack, they were all mostly data driven. It was more of a GDPR type of issues, like hackers tried to access data of either the Iranian shipping company or the Maersk, COSCO, to steal data, to encrypt data, which inevitably caused some property damage, and some of the containers would disappear and so on. But they were mostly data-oriented attacks. What triggered the attention of IMO and the operators to an extent are the second type of attacks we have, essentially the Port of Antwerp attack in 2011, and the Black Sea attack in 2017, where I think in Port of Antwerp, and Carl will be more willing to give us more information, I think, to an extent, is that containers were stolen for drug dealing. Innocent owners of containers suddenly, when they tried to get their containers from the Port of Antwerp by using the electronic release system, realized that the containers were gone. The port didn't have any idea where they were gone, and apparently it was a criminal gang operating and interfering electronically with the operation of the electronic release system to move drugs from point A to point B. And in the Black Sea incident, there was a manipulation of the automatic identification system of several vessels, more than 20, where they suddenly appear in the radar as being inland in Russia, close to an airport in Russia. The problem with the Black Sea attack was that there was no alert. Usually AIS systems, the GPS systems, they give you an alert, a sound alert, when there is jamming and when someone tries to interfere with the system by using noise. what the hackers did was more clever there, and it was a question of sending a false signal to the receiver of the vessel by a land station, and that didn't trigger the alert of the system because there was no jamming, there was no interference. They realized that the system assumed that that's the correct system. Now, as a result of those incidents, and as a result of several others not so well reported, IMO issued a resolution in 2017 and high-level guidelines, which essentially obliged, and I use obliged in a loose sense, to ship operators and ship owners to make the cyber risk management as part of the safety management. Not anymore just part of the security management of vessel, but it has a clear safety management function, essentially to deal with this ability of hackers to interfere now with the safety operations of the vessel, with the propulsion, with the navigation, and with cargo management. Now, once the resolution was out and the guidelines were out, BIMCO issued the cyber guidelines, which are one of the most detailed guidance on how to integrate cyber risk management into your safety management risk for operators and ship owners. And the most important development is that as of the 1st of January 2021, there are compulsory audits now to vessel operators to confirm that the cyber risk management system you have implemented complies with IMO regulations. And as we speak, there is an ongoing audit system around the world to check the cyber capabilities and the cyber protection that ship owners and operators have taken on board the vessel. We're not just discussing now corporate cyber issues like the headquarters of ship owners or the various offices around the world and what they do to prevent cyber attacks, but cyber attacks that are addressed directly against vessels, against the vessels. Now, inevitably, there are issues of liability, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on liability. We have limited time. I'll give you two examples, and I think one is about cruise ships, and the other is about cyber worthiness. Now, cruise ships, you might say, yes, it's not a major part of the industry, but the issue with cruise ships is that they attract a lot of attention because of their ability to carry so many passengers. They're a perfect target for hackers on the basis, imagine the equivalent of an aircraft. And imagine having a 911 nowadays, not in an aircraft, but in a vessel that has been controlled remotely by a hacker. Now, the Athens Convention of dealing with passenger liabilities for injury and death certainly doesn't discuss the issue of cyber risks. But the question is, if we have a cyber attack that leads to a collision, that leads to damage, to death or injury of passengers, is the Athens Convention capable of dealing with them and with the liability, with the claims, and to what extent? The answer is probably yes. Now, most likely, a cyber attack of that sort that will affect the power management of the vessel, the electronic charts of the vessel, or the GPS system of the vessel would probably qualify as a shipping incident, as it is a deficiency affecting the vessel. Now, if it is a shipping incident, then you have two defenses as a ship owner. Either that the damage, the injury to the passenger was caused by an act of a third party with the intent to cause the incident, if the claim is below 250,000 STRs, and if the claim is above 250,000 STRs, the defense you have is that you as an operator of the cruise ship you were not at fault for the injury. Now, in the first tier of liability, the 250,000, the defense is that it was wholly caused by a third party. Now, that will certainly not cover you as an operator if a disgruntled employee or a disgruntled IT contractor, to an extent, plugged in a device or forced or downloaded a Trojan horse or a virus into your system that essentially froze the navigation system of the vessel, causing the collision. That's certainly not an exclusion, and you have to cover it. For your insurance, you have to cover those losses. Now, where it might work, though, is, yes, if you have a cyber attack the way that happened in Russia, in the Black Sea, where a completely third party outside of your operations does target your cruise ship. The only problem you might have there is the word holy cause, that the sole cause of the accident, of the incident, should be the act of the third party. And then you open a can of worms there, because if they attacked you by means of a phishing attack, so one of your seafarers thought it was a legitimate email, opened it, downloaded its attachment, and that caused damage to the operating system of the vessel. And then the question is, was the sole cause of the accident the third party act, the hackers act, or the contributory negligence of your seafarer prevents you from using the defense under the Athens Convention? Similar things will happen with denial of service attacks. And I think denial of service attacks certainly will come from a third party outside. But the question is then, have you set up the system with the scrubbing centers and cleaning centers to prevent that from happening? Or your inability to control this type of situations is contributory negligence, constitutes contributory negligence, which then takes away the benefit of the exclusion. Now, if the claim is above 250,000 STRs, the operator of the cruise ship can avoid liability if it proves that the incident was not caused by its own negligence, by its own fault. Now, that is a better defense for operators, but again, you might face issues there with the software upgrades. And what if you postpone a software upgrade to coincide with the physical maintenance of the vessel, and something happens in between? And there is evidence that the upgrade that you were supposed to do would have prevented such an attack. Can you still claim the no-fault defense? It is unlikely in that kind of situation. Certainly, what might be a relief for operators in cruise ships is that the convention provides that when we discuss about fault, we don't include the fault of agents of the ship owner, of the operator, which probably will exclude the liability for accidents caused by the mistakes of IT contractors, of outsourced IT contractors, which again, it remains to be seen whether courts will take a expanded view of the term servants, and whether in some jurisdictions they will not necessarily pay attention to this distinction between servants of the carrier and agents. The one final thing I want to say about cyberworthiness is about the Hague-Visby rules. And certainly at some point, especially now that we have a clear plan by IMO and a clear mandate by IMO that operators would include a cyber risk management program, cyberworthiness will eventually become part of ship worthiness under the Hague-Visby rules. There's no doubt about it at some point in the future. The one question, of course, that has been raised and will be raised is, how about the due diligence requirement of the Hague-Visby rules in Article 4, i.e. that you are only liable for damages caused by the unseaworthiness of your vessel if you haven't dealt with your vessel in a due diligence way. Now, the problem there is that we don't have any more yet a golden standard. We don't know exactly how to interpret due diligence vis-a-vis the cyber defenses that an operator has to build, because it's a brand new development now that you need to integrate a cyber risk management program. And one of the problems that we face is in creating this golden standard is that some of the solutions that we use for cyber risks onshore cannot be translated easily in a marine environment. For example, two factors authenticated access is not easily implemented into a vessel. Also, we have issues with denial of service attacks. The way that we deal with denial of service attacks onshore in terms of scrubbing centers and cleaning centers, they are not necessarily they cannot necessarily be used in a maritime setting. So I think from now onwards, with the mandatory audits, the chase to create this due diligence, i.e. what are the golden standards in the industry when dealing with cyber risks, what are the majority of operators do when dealing with cyber risks, has started. And I think eventually, in a few years from now, we will end up with cases identifying what are we doing, what is the minimum that you need to provide as what are the best practices that you need to provide as an operator when dealing with cyber risks. Now, I don't know how much time I have yet. I want to say a few things about insurance. Now, insurers in London.
You have 2 to 3 minutes.
2 to 3 minutes, right. So I'll go quickly.
Yeah.
allow me 4 minutes, and I will do very quickly on that, if that's okay.
Okay.
2 minutes. Okay. I'll say 2 minutes then. The one thing that you need to know about the cyber risk insurance is that there is you'll be able to hear about CL380. CL380 has now been changed to LMA 5402, the Marine Cyber Exclusion, which essentially excludes any damage or loss caused by cyber attacks if the cyber attacks was used as a means of inflicting harm. So you need intention to cause damage to the property for insurers to exclude cyber loss caused by cyber attacks. Some of the new policies, some of the new clauses would also exclude damage caused by innocent cyber attacks, or for example, by one of your seafarers by accident has downloaded a virus. But again, the vast majority of them would exclude certainly intentional cyber attacks. The problem that you have now in the London market now, from a point of view of operators, is that the clauses that we use have a very broad causative element. They argue that any damage directly or indirectly caused by the a cyber attack, and that I will leave you with that in terms of insurance, is that the use of the term directly or indirectly has been interpreted to mean, not judicially yet, but most academics will tell you that it's a very, very broad causative term. So even if you use a smartphone to communicate, if the hackers use a smartphone to communicate between themselves, and they steal cargo physically from your warehouse, there is a very good chance that you won't get covered for the loss of those cargo from your warehouse on the basis that they were used electronic means to electronic means were used when stealing your cargo. Certainly, if there is any kind of interference with your systems, electronic systems on board the vessel, certainly there will be no cover for the loss, either from a P&I perspective or from an insurance perspective. And the final thing before I close, which will raise discussions, and it comes back to what Tabitha said. Tabitha very well argued that we are moving more to a product liability element. Certainly, we see that with autonomous cars. We have done some research on autonomous cars recently, and this is where we're going. The problem we have, though, with cyber risks and product liability is twofold. The first one is that software providers, and they are very keen to argue that we cannot provide a safe product. We cannot provide a 100% safe product, and they are very aggressive in trying to deny any product liability. And if you look into the agreements they have with operators, they exclude most of the liabilities under their service agreements, which means that your ability to claim indemnity from them is severely curtailed under your service agreements. If you are a ship owner, if you are any other user of software providers, of software. And the second problem that we have in law is that, at least under English law, there's not clear whether a software provider is a manufacturer or service provider. If you provide a tailor-made software to a shipping operator, you're certainly not a manufacturer. Most people will tell you that you are a service provider. So you don't even fall into the regime of product liability, which raises other issues about indemnity actions against them. So in one of our publications, and feel free to look at them after the end of the conference, we argue that maybe we need a new liability paradigm for cyber risks. And if software providers are not willing to contribute legally, maybe the idea is to create a fund, insurance/software providers fund, which essentially will provide cover for cyber losses from within that fund, or for some of the cyber losses from within that fund. And I'm sorry for taking a bit longer. These are the publications that we recently published on cyber risks, me and Professor Barry Sawyer, and feel free to have a look at them either for research or for any other reason. Again, thank you very much for your time, and I apologize for taking a bit long.